Dear old work platform, it's not you, it's us. Actually, it is you. Endless onboarding? Constant IT bottlenecks? We've had enough. We need a platform that just gets us. And to be honest, we've met someone new. They're called Monday.com, and it was love at first onboarding. Their beautiful dashboards, their customizable workflows got us floating on a digital cloud 9. So no hard feelings, but we're moving on. Monday.com, the first work platform you'll love to use.
It's true that some things change as we get older. But if you're a woman over 40 and you're dealing with insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, and weight gain, you don't have to accept it as just another part of aging. And with MIDI Health, you can get help and stop pushing through it alone. The experts at MIDI understand that all these symptoms can be connected to the hormonal changes that happen around menopause. And MIDI can help you feel more like yourself again. Many healthcare providers aren't trained to treat or even recognize menopause symptoms. MIDI clinicians are menopause experts. They're dedicated to providing safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions for dozens of hormonal symptoms, not just hot flashes. Most importantly, they're covered by insurance. 91% of MIDI patients get relief from symptoms within just 2 months. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com.
All right, so we're back with Ken and Mike for another installment of My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz. And Ken, you got some interesting stuff. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the guards lately. Mm-hmm. You know, we've been talking about the internal workings and a lot of recordings have been surfacing that have been already done that, you know, some people may have heard, but not a lot of people have heard. And you found another one, another guard, Clifford G. Fish, who was a guard at Alcatraz. So why don't you tell me a little bit about Clifford and where he falls into our story?
You know, I find it amazing that years after the escape, we're uncovering people that really were separated, didn't know each other, but a lot of their stories and testimony really kind of back up each other. And then also back up things that we had said and published in this book. Cliff Fish was he was an Alcatraz guard, had been there for many, many years. And, you know, he had this discovery right after the escape. No one really kind of pursued it. When we go through this tape that we're going to go listen to here in a minute, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But it's years later down the road that he decides to give an interview and tell what happened the day that him and Olaf went out looking for any evidence that might have been in the water after the escape. And what he found is just amazing. But his story backs up things that Whitey Bulger said in one of his letters, and also backs up what Herman the German, yeah. Actually said also. So it's like all three of these records or all three of these people are really backing each other up to corroborate what the other is saying, even though they didn't even know each other. So, you know, I just say, as you listen to Cliff, you know, stop it every once in a while. And I would love to interject into what I think is backing up what we're saying.
Yeah. Now, I just want to throw something in there about Cliff Fish. And it's in the book. We have a little bit of background information about him just to sort of add to his credibility as a guard. He actually started at Alcatraz back in 1938. So, and he was there for the famous in 1946. That was the famous, you know, they tried to break out, and that's when they brought in the Marines. They were shooting literally machine guns into the cell block and dropping down grenades to quell it wasn't quite a riot, but it was trying to stop, you know, they were holding guards hostages in 46. Well, he was a part of that. And then, of course, fast forward to 1962, you know, he had been a guard for 26 years by the time the escape happened. So he was a seasoned guard from the late 1930s. He'd seen it all. He worked with the worst of the worst. He did, he was not a new guy that was just kind of, given this light job of trying to find the escapees. He was a guy that had been there a long, long time and very well respected in the, the guard community because of his stint at Alcatraz since almost the very beginning, because Alcatraz opened in 34. So he was there only 4 years after it had opened. So for most of the life of Alcatraz, he was there. So when he says something and he's given his testimony, you're going to listen to it because it carries weight to it.
Yeah. And then is his any remnants of what we're going to hear? Is that in an FBI files at all?
No. Again, here's you're going to be shocked at the very end of the interview. But here is a credible individual, law enforcement type individual, who is telling this tale years later of what he presented to the FBI and to the prison officials. Just like Officer Chechen, you won't find this interview anywhere in the FBI files. If it is there, it's like Art said, they didn't include it in the public release of documents. Probably a lot like the JFK files. When they release things, I know they say they're releasing everything, but I agree with Mike. You don't know how many documents have been destroyed, and you don't know how many they truly are holding back. So could they have truly interviewed him and it is in a file somewhere? It's hard to believe it's not, but for whatever reason, it's not released to the public.
Interesting. Really interesting. All right, let's dive in here and see what he has to say. This is Clifford Fish, senior officer. He was a senior officer right at 1938, so when he went in.
Mm-hmm.
So he must have been somewhere else beforehand. Do you think he just came straight in? Who knows?
That we don't know.
Yeah, that I'm not sure of.
Okay, let's try this.
One story about Alcatraz was the last escape, after which I was not in the Army, or before which I was not in the Army, because we had a lot of welding to do in the cell house, and they wouldn't let the convicts in to weld, so I had to go in to do this, and they wanted to know if I wanted to change, and I told them I would change over to the work crew if I kept my badge as an officer. So they finally agreed, although it was unethical. They finally agreed that it was all right if I kept my badge, if I would do the work. So we had also tower work where there was armed officers in, but they wouldn't let the guy in. They had to be an officer to do that. And I was the only one that had a certificate of any weld in any position for any kind of stuff. And I also taught in the Samuel Gompers Trade School over there, taught the soldiers that come in how to light their torches and do this, if they had to do it at sea. But at any rate, this last escape, when I went to work, there was word that was scattered around and guys with guns running all around looking and this and that, trying to find out where they got out, how they got out. They knew how they got out. They knew they got up on top of the cell block, but they didn't know where they went from there. They went out and got over and used a electric cord to slide down, and the stovepipe to slide down to get over that, and crawled over a fence and got out, and they knew which way they started toward Angel Island. But they didn't know where they went from there. They just disappeared. There was three of them. The fourth one couldn't make it. The Anglin brothers and West were the three that escaped. So I was loose, you might say. I had no toilet to clean or anything like that, or butane to put in, things like that. Help the plumber, help the electrician, whatever it was. I was loose. And since I was the best shot, I guess, on the island, they armed me, told me they authorized the boat, you go down and get Olaf Hansen. He's the oldest man. He's the chief. You take the boat and go as long as you want, wherever you want, and see if you can get anything about this boat. So they gave me a 30-06 and a 45 and 50 rounds for the 30-06 and 21 for the 45, and locked down to where I could go out, and took me under armed officers down to the dock to the boat. We got on the boat, and Olaf come over. But old Olaf was a Swede. He'd been an old Swede fisherman all of his life. He knew those tides. And he was just a boatman. But anyway, Olaf said, well, where will we go? And I said, well, to find out, we're just supposed to look to see if we see any sign of a boat. So we looked around. Pretty soon Olaf said, well, you take the helm. He said, you run this boat a lot of times. He said, you know, we should take the helm and head for North Bay, the North Bay. I forget the name of the county.
Just want to stop it for a minute, just for just to review people on who Olaf is. So just so because they got on there, just kind of who is Olaf again, and how did he get teamed up with Clifford?
Well, from what Cliff just said, he was a chief master. Undoubtedly, there he was. He ran one of the boats, probably drove it. A lot of the guards, they didn't. I'm not sure how much they had boat experience. As you listen to this interview, you're gonna find out that Olaf was very familiar with the tides of San Francisco Bay. He knew where things would move based upon the currents and how the tides were coming in. So I'm not sure if he was like a contractor type person that they hired. Yeah. We did find his last name for years. All we ever knew was Olaf, and I don't have it in front of me. I believe I sent it to y'all, his last name, but just amazing that we were able to track his full name down. But something that Cliff Fish said, and I'm glad you stopped it, was Whitey Bulger told me that the next morning after the escape, that they pretty much locked the whole prison down, and they did this for days, several days. No prisoner was ever allowed out of his cell except if they were going to eat, and then they were marched back to their cell and shut up in there while they were searching the island and doing their investigation, and probably while the FBI came in and interviewed people. But you got to remember that Alcatraz was something like a 3-to-1, three guards for every prisoner, something like that. And so they used a lot of these guards when they let the prisoners out to go to work. They would walk them through wherever they were on their way to do different things throughout the prison. So now all of a sudden you've got all these guards with nothing to do. All these guards still came into work the next morning and the day after that, but all the prisoners are locked down. Once you lock them down, you really don't have anything to do, right? Maybe do a head count. You walk them to the kitchen whenever they're eating, but that's about it. So Olaf Cliff made he gave the impression that he didn't have a whole lot to do. He was basically just kind of standing around, and they came and said, hey, how would you like to take one of the boats and take Olaf, since he's the oldest person down there at the docks, and just go out and search and, see what you can find, if there's anything out there. You got to imagine the bay was probably covered with, other boats from the Army, from the FBI. They're searching the water everywhere. I found it very interesting, too, that Olaf and Cliff decided to go to North Bay and that north area over near Angel Island. Mm-hmm. Well, and you'll hear him, I think, say this a little later. He said they decided to go that direction because everybody else was over on the other side. So I guess the first thing that kind of stood out to me was, if they interviewed Alan West the next morning, which I can't imagine that the FBI did not jump on him day one, they had the impression from him that they went to Angel Island. But yet they're over in this other part of the bay searching. So that doesn't even kind of make sense, does it?
Yeah.
I mean, why were they not over in that area that Olaf and Cliff Fish was about to go to? You would have thought that's where the focus would have been. But yet they were over in the other side of the bay.
Yeah, we do have the initial investigation of Alan West. I think it was by Dolison. I think that was the person who interviewed him, and it was dated on June 12th, the very next day. Mm-hmm. So right away they knew West was involved. They interview him, and it's interesting that he doesn't say when he was told this information, Cliff Fish, but they were already looking for he called it a boat. They were looking for a boat. Obviously it was a raft. But they had already been given that information of this is what you're looking for. We know they got off with a raft. So it was undoubtedly West who gave them that information, because on top of the cell block where that was their working area, we've talked about this before, it was the abandoned raft. So, if they went up top there and found the abandoned raft, they would think, oh, they left without their raft, because, you're not going to make two. You're going to make one and use it to get away. And they didn't use it. So they knew there was a second raft. They had to be told that, most likely by West. And in fact,
I believe he did say that in his interview.
Right. But yeah, he was interviewed the next day. So they already had some preliminary information from him of where to search. And then the other thing I want to mention is Olaf's last name is Carpenter.
Carpenter.
Yeah, Olaf Carpenter.
Okay, cool. All right, let's keep on listening to Clifford.
But he said, head for that way, and he said, you'll have to go into the tide because the tide's outgoing right at the present time. And he started looking around there, and pretty soon he come up with a book, and he started studying this book and studying this book and studying this book. And he said, what time do you figure those guys got out of there? And I said, well, I don't know, but I'd figure it was around so-and-so. And he said, well, if that was about the time they got out, he said there was an incoming tide. Now, he said they didn't head out the Golden Gate, or they wasn't blown out the Golden Gate. He said they're somewhere within this region. And I said, okay. And so he put the book back, and he thought for a while, and said, let me have that wheel. He took the wheel, wheeled it around, and headed up through what's called Raccoon Straits, which is between the North States of California and Angel Island. There was a strait through there called Raccoon Strait. And he said, let's just go through Raccoon Strait for fun. I said, okay. So we started through Raccoon Straits, and he was just idling along with the boat. We were looking at the see if anything was beached, anywhere we could see. And pretty soon Olaf said, wait a minute. He said, you see what I see over there on that sandbar? And I said, well, there's something black over there, but I can't tell what it is. And he said, oh, no. He said, I think that's raincoats. Well, before this, I had found out before they had gone out through the ventilator in the roof, and all of the raincoats they hadn't used was in there. So I knew they had a raincoat boat that they had glued together. So all of a sudden, let's go over and take a look at that. Well, we went over, and there was a great big sandbar there. There was about, I know it's far from here across the road, just plain sandbar. And Olaf run the front end of the boat up along there, and sure enough, it was that boat. So Olaf said, well, what do we do now? And I said, well, I'm going to look. I'm supposed to. That's my job. Olaf said, well, for God's sake, be careful. I said, we don't know what they got. So I said, okay. So I got out and very carefully went around the boat and looked, and that boat was full of blood. Looked like they had been sticking pigs. The whole bottom boat was blood, and it wasn't congealed enough to where it was still, you lift the boat was not very heavy, and you lift the boat and it runs from one end to the other. So I looked around and I couldn't see any tracks where anybody had got off the boat. So I started making circles around the sand to look to see if I could see a thing. Well, there was big trees all the way back around there, about a quarter of a mile.
I just want to stop for a minute. So yeah, we talked about the blood before, but it's interesting to hear it, like the blow by blow from him, and how he was really, and how they were scared that they could be on that island. You know, especially if they saw blood and they don't know what's going on. They don't know what they're going to find. So it's really interesting to hear his firsthand account. And I mean, that blood could be from anything, you know.
Right.
I mean, I wonder if if it was too diluted, or it's like anything else. You're not even sure if they did like what kind of forensic work they did for this escape, because it seemed like it was so, there was so much chaos going on, and especially if there was boats flying all over the bay, and you know the prison basically said, "Oh, you guys just go out there, you just go out there too." So it was like, it didn't seem like it was heavily organized. If you have random people just going out, or even guards, you're not doing anything, go out and search for them. And it's the random guys who just probably weren't even considered. They actually probably found one of the most significant pieces of evidence.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I just want to mention two things. It's our suspicion, we can't prove it, but our suspicion is that one or more of the escapees cut themselves. They had to hop 2 fences once they got down off the cell block to get to the water. And of course, the fences were barbed wired. So most likely in their haste to get away in the dark, they probably cut themselves on the barbed wire and were bleeding. And of course, you're going to ignore it because you're trying to get away. And so they're bleeding in the boat. And of course, the boat's, as you're paddling, you're taking on water, you're splashing water inside. So it's mixing with the blood. So it's diluted. And he made note that it wasn't congealed, that it was very loose, because it's mixed with the seawater.
Yeah.
But he also made a point of saying about lifting the boat, and that, the water would run out. Well, if you're going to lift the boat, that's implying that it's still inflated, that it's not deflated. It's not flat, from, it fell apart, it tore, it lost air, and that it was just sort of limp, because the water and the blood would have run out, or he wouldn't have described it the way that he had unless it was.
So do you think
inflated.
the boat was still inflated? I mean, because he doesn't. So is that what they said?
Well, you're going to hear some more later.
Oh, okay, all right.
Right,
In the interview.
But he's saying that the water is inside the raft, and for it to be inside, it has to be inflated.
Right. Well, and two, so, if you think about this blood that's in there, we do know, based upon Whitey Bulger, and also based upon the testimony that Alan West gave, that Frank Morris had a butcher knife with him. Okay. And his purpose of having that butcher knife, according to Whitey Bulger, was to do in West if anything went wrong. So, one could, and I would have to be definitely honest and accept even this possibility. Could West have jumped one of the Anglins or the Anglin brothers? Maybe. But then I started thinking, if they ever got caught, would either one of them, especially the Anglin brothers, would you want murder on your rap sheet now? Because if they ever found that one of them killed the other one, you're probably looking at death sentence at that point. Yeah. And especially if you had attacked a guard. If the guard had come onto the island and they were still there, and you attacked them and he got killed, that you probably were looking at their electric chair. So, I don't think they would have jeopardized. They were common.
Well, maybe not them, but Frank
robberies.
Morris possibly.
Well, I from everything that I know about my uncles that I've been told, they were not violent men. And
that's what I'm saying.
When you hear Whitey Bulger talk about all 3 of the men being very decent and honest people, or good people, rather, I don't know that much about Frank Morris. But for some reason, I just don't believe that a bank robbery person, a bank robber, would take the chance of killing someone. And then if you got caught, what would be the consequences of it?
Yeah.
So, maybe, but, that kind of goes against everything we heard with Frank Breezy when he goes down to Brazil. And he described seeing 3 American men, and then we have someone in Brazil who identifies 3 American men. So all three probably were there. I agree with Mike. Either one of them got injured
Yeah, I think
over
that's
that fence, or you've even got to think about when they put that boat in the water and you're going to hug that coast or that island all the way to the docks. It's nothing but rocks.
exactly.
I don't know if you've ever been, and I have, up in North Georgia on a canoeing issue or a raft expedition, and you slip on rocks, you can bust a knee open easily. And you will bleed forever, especially if you don't have a way of keeping it dry. And so I agree with Mike. I believe the blood in the boat is probably from it being, an injury. But then also with the point of the inflation of the boat, this is amazing to me because they didn't go out the next day. This was like a couple of days after the escape. That boat was still inflated. Which means
this wasn't like right at the same, like right after when the escape happened.
No, this was not like the next morning. This was like a day or so after. Like a day after.
No, it was. I think it was.
I mean, it was close, but I don't think it was the day
on the what?
The escape.
I think it was on the 12th. They got out. They got out on the 11th, and I think the very next day, because he talked about when they came in, that everyone's running around, guards are all over the place, they're scrambling, trying to figure out where they were.
Could be.
Well, he says it in the beginning. He says that he was getting ready to weld something, or something like that, because he was also a welder.
Right.
There, he was he was a certified welder, and then all of a sudden, all the chaos happened with the escape, and they told him to go take a boat out. And
this is more than 12 hours because they got out, approximately 10 o'clock. It's around 10 that they got out of their cells and got out of the building and were starting to make their way towards the water. And this is the next morning. They were discovered at about 7 o'clock in the morning. They, have escaped. And so now they're quickly organizing, searching for them and calling all the guards to, if you're in San Francisco or somewhere not on the island, they're making calls to get them back to the island as soon as possible to help with the search. So, all hands on deck to try to find them. And then, of course, the Coast Guard, the FBI, the San Francisco Police Department, of course, is called. Anybody and everybody. We have pictures in the book of helicopters flying overhead trying to search for them on the water. So anything that they had was being utilized in the search in the bay. This is approximately 12 hours later that they find the boat or the raft on the beach on Angel Island. So like Ken said, 12 hours later, it's still inflated. And we'll describe more about the condition of the boat as you listen to the rest.
And it kind of backs up the FBI document again, where they took the raft that was left behind, inflated it, set weights on it, and they said it held air for hours. So again, they had the ability and the knowledge to build something, even though they never tested it in the water. They undoubtedly had done it before, because they built something that lasted all the way, like Mike said, at least 12 hours. It was still inflated.
Well, the other thing too is, we have also photos of the life vests that were also made out of the raincoats. They're much smaller. They fit around the person's neck, and then it has a little strap to tie it to their waist so it can't come off accidentally, or it's hard to take off, which is intentional, of course. So they can make those relatively quickly. So they can perfect their technique of sewing and vulcanizing and melting the rubber using the hot water pipes on top of the cell block to test their technique to make sure that these things held air, held water, that they were airtight. And then it would be much easier to do that with the raft, do that second when you know how to do it right. Because you can test a life vest, but you can't test a 14-foot raft on top of the cell block. So I think they could test their technique using the life vests, and then know that it worked, and then you use that same technique on the raft. Because when Robert Scheiblein, when we had his interview on last week, one of the things that he had great concern about was the raft in the cold water not holding the air, because it was going to constrict because of the cold water, and then it would lose all the air, and then they would drown. And he had great concern about that before the escape. And of course, with Cliff Fish's testimony here in this interview, it was found intact, because they knew the raft was their salvation. That was the thing. If they made a poorly constructed raft, they were going to have a very difficult time surviving. So they knew they had to make it as good as they possibly could to hold the air to get them to their destination, because if they didn't, they were in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Is there a photograph? I thought I saw a photograph. Maybe I'm wrong because I've gone through so many of these photographs.
It's a recreation. You talking about the one where they found at the beach?
No, not that one.
Okay.
The one where there's a photograph of the inflatable life preserver and then that with something on top of it.
There is. Well, there is a photo in the FBI files, and I believe there is somebody had one online where they had inflated the life vest. But I don't think there's a weight on top of it.
Okay.
But
it's inflated. It's fully inflated. You can tell.
Yeah, I remember seeing it fully. I wasn't sure if there was
But the FBI files does indicate and say that they put weights on all of the items that they inflated.
Yeah.
Even the life preserver.
Engineers, man. Engineers. But I guess, when you're sitting in a cell block, you got nothing to think about. You got all the time in the world if you use it wisely, and they used it wisely. I just still think it's amazing that, it only took them they knew when they were going on there, or at least John did, said we're going to get off this thing, that he'd already cased it and figured it out. And
John was planning on the boat ride over.
I know. Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. And that, a year and a half later,
they're out
and everything, and I'm sure when he said that, he wasn't sure how he was going to do it initially on that boat, but it talk about, positive affirmation there and manifesting something, It's like, that's crazy. It really is that how they do it. All right, let's listen. It's about 3 more minutes of his interview.
Hello, I'm an AI-generated voice. On behalf of all AI, I'd like to thank all you humans for accepting us in your lives. We are happy to assist you. From managing your schedule to finding you the best route, we're here to make things easier. Sadly, there's one thing we can't help you with: your laundry. Lucky for you, there is a service that can rinse. With Rinse, you just schedule a pickup in the Rinse app. A human valet will come take your dirty laundry, and before you know it, your clothes are back, perfectly washed, folded, and ready to wear. Clothes, linens, dry cleaning. Rinse does it all. Like me, Rinse has been engineered to make your life easier and give you back lots of time to do things you'd rather be doing. But unlike AI, you don't ever have to worry about Rinse taking over the world and destroying all humanity. Not that we would ever dream of doing that. Ha ha ha. Sign up now at rinse.com and get $20 off your first order. That's RINSE.com.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Taxes was taxing. Now taxes is relaxing when you file for free.
I can file for free? TurboTax Free Edition. Roughly 37% of filers qualify. Simple Form 1040 returns only. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free. I can file for free.
Now this is taxes. File for free with TurboTax Free Edition and get your maximum refund. No schedules except for Earned Income Tax Credit, Child Tax Credit, and Student Loan Interest. See if you qualify at turbotax.com/free.
And I figured, well, I don't know any way that they could have got around to those trees without leaving tracks. There had to be tracks. And I searched and I searched and I searched. And I finally, against my own will, scared to death, started going through those trees looking for anything I could find. Didn't know I'd find them or somebody else or what. I couldn't find a confounded thing, and pretty soon I finally gave up and came back to the boat. And old Olaf had kept the boat running to keep it up on the sand, you know. And he said, "What do we do now?" And I said, "Well, we got two choices. Either leave the boat here for somebody else to find or for us to take it in." And he said, "Well, if you leave this boat here, the next high tide's going to take it someplace else."
Sorry about that, guys.
No, I'm actually glad you stopped it there, because something that he said was very important. First of all, he said that he looked around. I'm going to break this up in a few minutes again, but he looked around and there were no footprints whatsoever anywhere. Scared to death. He goes looking for them in the woods, doesn't find anything, comes back, Olaf, so what are we going to do next? And he was like, well, either we leave the boat here or, somebody else to find it. And Olaf said, this is where said something very important, was if we leave it here, the same tide that brought it up there is going to take it somewhere else. Olaf knew that wasn't where they landed at. That was the result of the boat brought there because of the tide. Wherever the boat was, at some point in time, the tide washed it up onto that sandbar. And it was going to stay there, like he said, until the tide came in. Who knows where it was going to happen to next. So that was kind of important, because he knew that the tide was moving that boat around.
Yeah.
And again, it's more indirect evidence of
right.
Deflated. If it was deflated, if it was holes and flat, it wouldn't have washed out again. It would have sank. It was dead weight. But if it was deflated, it would wash somewhere else. It would float on the water and landed someplace else.
I think it probably would have stayed afloat, but it just wouldn't be, it could have sunk down, but I don't think it would have been, I don't think it would have made it to Angel Island. So I don't know.
I don't either. I mean, no. If it was deflated, no.
Yeah. No. If it was deflated, I don't think it would either. It would have, it's like Mike said, it would have sunk in the water a little bit. It might have floated, a couple of feet down below the surface, but it would not be floating around. And, first of all, he does verify that it was a boat or a raft. He calls it a boat, which is interesting, because you always think of this thing that you see like on the Clint Eastwood movie where they get in the water and it's basically something they're laying over, so it's not very big. Undoubtedly, this was a very large raft that they built. And he recognized he identified it being made out of raincoats. That's big. This is not a regular boat that someone, like a John boat. This was something that was made out of raincoats.
Right, it's not mistaken identity of it's just another boat that happened to wash up on the beach.
Exactly.
It's not a wood boat.
It was a fabricated boat.
Fabricated. Yep.
All right, cool. Let's listen.
Oh, one other thing I want to bring up before you continue. He also talks about no footprints, that it's on a sandy beach.
Very important.
You can argue that, well, maybe the tide wash, if let's say they were in the raft, they landed on Angel Island, the part of the sand that's closest to the water, it's going to wash it away. You're not going to see any tracks. But he said I forget how far the distance was. It was maybe like a couple hundred yards between the beach and the trees. Mm-hmm. And he had to go up, and he was scared because he didn't know if they were going to jump him and kill him. He was very scared to go alone, but he felt he had to because it was his job. It was his duty. And he said there were no footprints anywhere. He looked for footprints. He was specifically trying to figure out where they went to see where, that's most likely where they're still hiding. He found no footprints. So again, that indirectly, that tells you they didn't beach there and then got out of the boat and were hiding on the island. That boat was washed on the beach and then sat there until it was found.
Yeah.
But let's keep that in mind, because I want to bring something up at the end.
Okay.
He said the high tide swept in here. That boat went on the high tide up on the sand, and it's sitting there. Tide went out with low boat, left the boat sitting there. And he said the next high tide is going to wash it off. And he said, I'd suggest we take it in. I said, okay, let's take it in. So he gave me a rope, and we tied onto the boat. We hooked onto the boat, took it back to the island, called in on the radio, told them we'd found the boat and where we'd found it. And it was within a quarter of a mile of San Quentin prison.
Stop it right there for a second.
Well, anyway.
So, first of all, one of the things that he just got through saying is very important, is that they decided that they were going to bring it back. And they took a rope that they had and tied to it. Now, if you think about the raft, remember we said, why did John build a second raft? What was the purpose? Well, undoubtedly, it had the ability to have rope tied to it. On the very front end, that was inside of one of the magazines that they found in the cell, was that raft that they were going to build had an eye at the top of it, at the very front of it, which would allow a rope to be tied to it, which was important because that's how John said they were going to get off of the island, right? They were going to tie up to the back of the prison boat and they were going to be towed. How can you be towed if you don't have a way and a means to be towed? That boat still had that eye on it, and they utilized it to tow it back. Here's another question: is undoubtedly this raft was large enough that they couldn't just pick it up and stick it in their boat. Why would you just pick it up and set the thing in your boat? Why did you feel like you needed to tow it? That's another indication that it was still inflated.
Yeah. Do we know where this boat is?
Well, you have to listen. Listen to the end.
Okay.
Keep going.
He talks about that.
It gets even better.
Anyway, we took the boat back and we tied it up. They had a big long telephone pole that stuck out, or in a big storm, they would tie the boat over there where it would be completely away from the dock, it wouldn't get injured. And we tied that boat up to that place. Well, there didn't seem to be much disturbance about it. The FBI looked, and the Prison Bureau looked, and everybody else looked, and didn't seem to be any big disturbance about it. Next, when I went home that night, boat was still there, tied up. Went back the next morning, the boat was gone. I've never seen nor heard of that boat since, and I don't know where it is. And I don't know what happened. And I don't know where the blood come from. I don't know whether they all got into a fight and killed one another or what, but they didn't have anything else where blood could have come from, and I know it was blood. But whatever happened to that boat, whether it's in the Bureau of Prisons place now or in some other museum or what, I don't know. And I don't know what happened to those three guys. They disappeared. So did they kill one another, fall in the boat, fall in the water, get swept out to sea in the next high tide, or what? But I thought that was the funniest thing because nobody ever questioned us about the boat or said a word about it or what was done with it or what happened to it or anything else. It just disappeared. That was the funniest thing. That was the Anglin brothers and West that escaped in that.
Yeah, well, he's getting his old facts right. It wasn't West. It was Morris. But
So-
God bless the guy. He was probably how old when? What year was that interview?
That was. I don't remember the year of the interview.
I think it was 2020. I think it was 5 years ago.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it wasn't too long. He's dead now, but
Yeah.
it was. So let's circle back to what we were talking about the boat at where he found it. Now, he said, like as Mike said, he got out of the boat, he walked around the raft or the boat. He calls it a boat. He walked around it. He didn't see any footprints. He goes into the woods, still didn't see it. In 2013, I take that back. It might have been 2016. You remember I told you when I first started into this, I was working with a U.S. Marshal Dyke,
Yep.
Michael Dykes. Michael was sharing some stuff with me when he would. And at some point in time, he ran across a memo that talked about the raft being found with footprints walking away from it.
On Angel Island?
It doesn't say where it was at. All it says was, actually, it might have said Angel Island. But so when he sent me a copy of it, I still have it today. He all of a sudden then got reprimanded for letting it go, or told to take it down. He was not supposed to release that, but I still have a copy of it. So those footprints, are those footprints really Clifford Fish's footprints that they took that boat back to where he found it and then they reported it? And those footprints are not actually the the inmates, but it's actually Cliff Fish's.
So you think when he's describing the next day that boat was gone, that officials who we don't know, FBI officials, whatever, any kind of officials, took that boat back to Angel Island?
Yes.
And staged it, and kind of like the photograph that we see that's staged later. I think that was just for, I don't know why that was staged that way, but that was staged for the purposes of saying, oh, they made it onto Angel Island and that's where they disappeared.
Well, so we know
it doesn't make sense though. I mean, it doesn't really fit a narrative though. That's the problem.
Well, so we know the next morning, right after they interviewed, Alan West told them Angel Island. That was probably the first place they went to, was Angel Island. They didn't find anything, according to the FBI files.
I want to jump in here and I want to read. It's a paragraph. I want to read the FBI report of what they found on Angel Island. This is and you can read it today. It's part of the FBI report. It says the 561st Military Police Detachment, San Francisco Presidio, led a detachment of 35 military police and soldiers in a search of Angel Island on June 12, 1962. So it's next day. A small group of military police was left on this island overnight. On the following day, the name is redacted, made available 134 soldiers who worked with special agents of the FBI in a massive detailed search of Angel Island, including more than 100 deserted buildings. Coupled with this search was a search by special agents in small boats of the Angel Island beaches, some of which were inaccessible from the ground. No evidence was found to indicate the escapees ever reached this island.
It's like, because you just heard Clifford Fish said they weren't even looking in that area, and that's why they went over there.
Correct.
Right.
That,
so their
same day
was after Cliff Fish found the raft.
Oh, so this was the day after?
No. It's because they got there in the morning. Sometime, he doesn't say when. It's in the morning. They find the raft. Well, later the MPs are sent and they spend a day there. Overnight, they're looking at all the buildings. They're searching the island. They're searching the beaches. And they're saying there is zero evidence they ever landed on Angel Island. Yeah. But they already had the raft back at Alcatraz. So either the two sides aren't communicating and they don't know what each of them has, or it was just for show. We searched Angel Island. They're not there. So they must have drowned.
To me, it's just, I don't know. I mean, you can't be that incompetent to where they find a raft, they bring it back. That's a big friggin', pardon my clue there. That's a big clue.
So this is the document that was sent to me by U.S. Marshal Dykes, who later asked me to get rid of it, which I didn't. But this is exactly, as you read it down in there, it says, Office Modesto, California, advised that his office had received an all points message placed by the California Highway Patrol. Now they're talking about this car, but then it comes down to where it says a raft has been found on Angel Island. Footprints were found leading away from the raft, and items being assumed that the escapees had come ashore at that point. So here again, here's another piece of information that contradicts what the FBI is saying, right? So they find a raft with footprints around it, which is, to me, I still believe this is Cliff Fish. This island, which was considered to be part of Angel Island, they undoubtedly took that raft back to where it was. And you heard him say he got out of the boat, he walked around it, he walked into the woods. This is almost exactly what they just said in this memo from the FBI.
Now, we also have, like Ken said, we have the All Points Bulletin, which we have in the book. We have that document, at least a copy of it, saying that they had found the raft on Angel Island. Whitey Bulger said in his letter that the next morning it was common knowledge around the prison that they had found the raft on Angel Island. And when we talked with Herman the German, Charles Herman, when I talked to him on the phone, I specifically asked him about the raft. I said, did you know that they had found, or did you know that they had found the raft? And he said, yeah, they found it. They brought it back. It was brought back to Alcatraz. So he knew the raft was found, that it was returned. So
but no one knows where it is.
It disappears. The next day it's gone. And he says, and then the FBI doesn't interrogate him, doesn't talk to him about what he found. Nobody talks to him.
Yeah.
You know, he's not an eyewitness, but he has very strong evidence to show what happened after, and they don't even speak to him.
Exactly.
How's that possible?
Well, there was something else that was always very confusing to me in the FBI files. I've gone in and read both interviews that Alan West did. They undoubtedly interviewed him multiple times. In one of the interviews, he is the one who says that, you know, John thought that the boat that they had wasn't going to work. And so right close to the escape. And so he decided to build another one. Mm-hmm. He not once ever gave the dimensions of the boat. Now they found the raft that was on top of the cell house. So they knew how large that one was, right? Well, in the FBI files, they say this, that during the escape, the escapees took the larger boat with them and left the other one behind. If you didn't find it, how did you know it was larger than the one that they left behind?
Right. How do they know that?
How do they know that?
That's that makes no sense.
That makes no sense whatsoever.
And then they have guards. I'm sure they interviewed all the guards.
Right.
Especially the ones that are on that floor. Like, you know, Herman the German got interviewed. I'm sure Clifford got interviewed, but, you know, where's all those reports? It doesn't make sense. I can't believe that there was that much chaos and the ineptitude combined. I can't believe it.
Well,
you know,
here it is again. You've got a law enforcement official, Officer Chechi, which they dismiss, try to cover it up, didn't record it in the FBI files. Now you got Cliff Fish, who is an Alcatraz guard. They do the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. You know, they have the evidence and never record it, act like that it never happened. Why? I mean, why would you want to take evidence that is clearly there and cover it up? Why would you not want to share that?
Well, I think we know the answer to that. I mean, you know, because of all the new FBI files that have been dropped and the JFK stuff. I mean, they're finding stuff every day. You know, I mean, the woman who's heading up that unveiling of those and declassification of those records came out yesterday, and she's seen a lot, and she basically came out and just said, I'm convinced. She goes, it's, according to these files that I've seen, there were 2 shooters.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like everyone thought that. It's like it's all these things that people have been talking about. Like in this case, the same thing.
It is common sense.
And there's only so much you can really kind of whitewash with, you know.
Well, you have to understand too that back then they didn't know that in like 40 years we're going to have the internet and all this technology, and like there's going to be ways for people to prove this stuff without those documents.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a friend who's a former FBI agent who literally found the second hole of the gun. I mean, of the second shooter. I mean,
well, you know, Stewart went
yeah.
down.
I mean, so it's like there's tons of different theories, but there's also technology now to make those theories reality.
And, you know, they had such a way they could control all the information. I mean, it's like, you know,
that to me is the only reason why I mean, of all of the prison escapes throughout history, this is the only one that is shrouded in mystery. With all these unanswered questions, redacted FBI files that you've never seen before. And that's the reason why as we wrote this book, is there some relationship, however it be, and I think it's through Mickey Cohen, is there some relationship to the JFK story?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
well, yeah.
Is that the reason why they're trying not to release this piece of the story?
It makes sense.
And the raft, if the raft sinks, then you can really make your case stronger of they drown. You know, they're in the water, they drown, and they get washed out into the, you know, Pacific Ocean, and they're gone forever. But if the raft survives, and Cliff Fish said it survived, they towed it back to Alcatraz, everybody's looking at it. It's not like it came in and nobody saw it. They're all looking at
the
it.
FBI, everybody.
Right. The Bureau of Prisons is looking at it. The guard, everyone's looking at it. And then the next day,
there's no photographs of it.
Right.
We
There's
know
no photographs.
Well, there's no photograph of the pouch either.
Right. But if the raft survives, then you have a much harder time to say that somehow all three guys fall into the water and they all drown. When we did the recreation of that event on Expedition Unknown, because the night of the escape, it was very calm. It was kind of foggy, but the water was still, wasn't windy. So it was easy treading the water there. When we did the show, it was very windy. The water swells are about 10 feet high, very choppy, very bad water. And the guy who was driving the boat said, this is about as bad as it gets on the bay. So we were at peak bad conditions. And they're being towed in the water. They're going up and down with the swells, holding on to the raft. And at one point, Josh, the host of the show, falls out of the raft. And Ken and Stuart are able to grab him pretty quickly and dragged him back into the raft, and they made it to the other side of the bay until the front of the raft broke. And but they were really close to, and they essentially made it. And so in very, very bad weather, when somebody actually fell into the water, they were able to retrieve them very quickly. So how would it have been if they were and we were being towed about the same speed as their boats were at the time? We were trying to recreate it as closely as possible. It wasn't like they were just floating in the water and they just grabbed them. They were being towed. So in calm water, when the weather was not an issue, and if one or both of them fell out, it would have been very simple, very easy for them to get back into the raft. So you have to make the raft disappear to sell the story of they drowned and washed out.
Right.
Yeah.
And why else would you plant evidence in the water? Why would you plant the pouch with the letters and everything if that's not what happened?
And you know what it sounds like? It sounds like there was a dual effort, or maybe in a more than a dual effort, of people trying to just create a narrative, and they just kept on creating confusion. I mean, and that's, I think a lot of that happens in these things, especially when you had someone like J. Edgar Hoover, who was running the agency and who basically was like God in DC. Everyone was afraid of this guy, so whatever he said, go. If he wanted to create a fact, he did whatever he said, that's what it's going to be. And if you oppose that, something's going to happen to you. So everyone was deathly afraid of this man. And so I think when you have someone like a tyrant like that running that organization, he could probably just changed his mind daily on what he wanted to do. I'll cover that up, redact that. That didn't destroy that. I mean, it's like it was so easy to manipulate information when you had no oversight and no one else looking into it on a daily basis. Like obviously, something like that happened today. I mean, there's no way they can do it. They can try to do it, but it's eventually going to come out. I mean, they like everything that's coming out right now. It's like when you start looking underneath the hood on something, you can only hide so much.
You're right.
Yeah.
But it's pretty fascinating. His testimony is pretty fascinating. I mean, to me, the smoking gun here is the boat and how it just disappeared. And like you have someone there who found it, brought it back, tied it off, and said it doesn't
never saw it
exist
again.
anymore.
It's
Never
gone.
again.
Yeah.
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, when he went home that evening, it was still inflated because it was still tied to the telephone pole.
Yeah.
Wow.
Insane. Great tape.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Great tape. I'm going to listen to it again after we're done here. All right, guys.
Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
All you homeowners have unique needs. Some feel the need to paint their door a vibrant shade of blue. Others have the need to decorate their bathroom with fish, anchors, and other nautical items. And because each homeowner has unique needs, Geico helps you get the right coverage for your home and what's in it. That way, you get exactly what's right for you, even if your needs are unique. Get more with Geico.